Right now, on Law&Crime Special Report, Justice and Peace. On Friday, Mayor Greg Fisher announced that the Louisville Metro Police Department had initiated termination proceeding for the detective involved in the death of Breonna Taylor.
Schroeder is today initiating termination procedures against Louisville Metro Police Officer Brett Hankinson.
Plus, the state of Colorado has become one of the first states to end qualified immunity with the passing of their accountability bill, SB 217.
It's now the law of Colorado.
Later, over the weekend, a viral video showed a man being held in a chokehold by an NYPD officer. The officer involved has been suspended without pay pending an investigation.
Yo, stop choking him, bro. Yo, stop choking him. Yo, he's choking him. Let him go, bro. Let him go.
Justice and Peace bringing you inside the movement for police reform. It's Monday, June 22nd, 2020. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Brian Buckmire here at Justice and Peace. And as I said, we've got quite the stories for you, so let's jump right into it. First, Breonna Taylor. The officer who was involved in the shooting and death of Breonna Taylor was actually fired. And a part of that detailed letter of his firing actually highlights a lot of the points that we've been not only asking, but also arguing. Let's first start by looking at Mayor Fisher, who talked about not being able to answer all of the questions, but kind of started this whole process of this officer being fired.
Chief Schroeder is today initiating termination procedures against Louisville Metro Police Officer Brett Hankinson. Unfortunately, due to a provision in state law that I very much would like to see changed, both the chief and I are precluded from talking about what brought us to this moment or even the timing of this decision. I know that you will have questions, and I'm sorry that I cannot answer them because of the state law, ARS Chapter 67C.3261F.
All right, so as I said earlier, we do actually have the report, and we'll show that while we're speaking, but I want to bring in my guest, criminal defense and civil litigation specialist, Lakai Vincent. Lakai, thank you for joining us. Let's jump right into this, but I want to kind of give our viewers a rundown of what the office is saying. They're saying that Detective Hankinson is being terminated for violation of obedience of rules and regulations, as well as use of deadly force. It's quoted as saying it's an extreme indifference to the value of human life when you, being the detective, wantonly and blindly fired 10 rounds into the apartment of Breonna Taylor. It said that it's not only a danger to Breonna Taylor, but 3 other occupants, and he shot into a patio door and window that was covered in a way that he could not see who was inside. It also ends by saying he was previously disciplined in January 9th of 2019, for conduct that injured an innocent person. So, Lakai, we have all of this detailed information about Breonna Taylor. Someone's fired, but no arrest. What do you make of where we are so far in the Breonna Taylor saga?
So, Brian, let's step back for a moment. This incident occurred on March 13th. People have been asking for justice from that day, the day that Breonna Taylor was killed. We are certainly moving in the right direction by having this officer fired, but it questions. It doesn't sound like any of the facts that they have today was likely anything different than they had 30 days ago or 60 days ago. So you wonder why it's taken so long for this officer to be fired. We're still at the point that the other officers have not been fired, nor have they been charged. So while I think it's a step in the right direction, it's certainly not been enough.
Yeah. And today, I believe, if my math is correct, would be day 100. It's 100 days from March 13th. And the only step we've seen towards, and I might even call it less of a step and more of a crawl, because I don't think it really moves that far, for justice for Breonna Taylor, is the termination of an individual. What do you make of the language from this termination paperwork? It speaks pretty loudly to me. What did you think?
Well, I think at this point, there is a lack of trust between citizens and the police. I think that the mayor has to be transparent. It sounds like he wants to be even more transparent, but he's not in a position to do so based on state law. But I think that he has to be transparent. He has to show that he is not by any ways or any means encouraging this behavior. He is admonishing that police officer. He's laying out what happened on that day. And so I think that he hits it right on target. It's reckless and indifferent to human life. He could have potentially killed someone else outside of that apartment as well by firing 10 shots into Breonna Taylor's home.
Now, my question for you, because a lot of people are asking, all right, is this murder? Is this manslaughter? I don't think they could get to the level of murder maybe, because we don't have all the facts, we still need those. But I hear extreme indifference of value of life and wanton and blindly. And I hear criminal negligent homicide, maybe something reckless, maybe a level of manslaughter. That sounds like legal language. What do you make of that?
I agree with you, Brian. I mean, I think you can put manslaughter on the table, but I certainly don't think you should disregard murder. I think that second degree should be on the table as well. We know that it doesn't rise to the level of first degree because he wasn't necessarily lying in wait. It was not premeditated. But in terms of having an intention to kill, I think there's certainly questions as to whether or not there was an intention to kill. He shot 10 rounds into an apartment, and he was not sure that it was occupied by anybody that was innocent based on their belief in the warrant. So I think that it should certainly be on the table, but I don't think a jury should have any problem finding him guilty of manslaughter at the very least.
Exactly. Now, Breonna Taylor, 100 years, we're going to continue to, 100 days, sorry, we're going to continue to say her name in the sense of trying to find justice for her. Like I said, it's a bit of a crawl. We're moving forward in the right direction, but we definitely want to see more, especially more transparency in this case that will lead us to justice in this endeavor. I want to switch gears just a little because we're talking about taking steps towards justice, and I believe that Colorado took a step in that direction, but the question is it enough and what will it do? Let's take a quick clip of the Governor Polis talking about the removal of state qualified immunity. I want to be very particular. It says state qualified immunity, not federal, and we'll discuss the difference in a second.
This is a long overdue moment of national reflection. And as a 17-year-old black student named Ashira Campbell told me yesterday, it's not just a protest against police brutality, but a protest against a society that is too comfortable with injustice. It's up to those of us in government, our elected officials, to hear the undeniable, unassailable message of these demonstrations and the voices of those who deserve to be addressed. The vision that every American deserves the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, regardless of race. That black Americans specifically deserve to feel safe going for a run in our neighborhoods, walking to the convenience store, watching birds at the park, interacting with the police, or just being in their own homes. And that we cannot wait any longer to knock down institutional racism born out of America's original sin of slavery.
So qualified immunity is a federal and state standard that allows individuals to sue representatives of the state working in their official capacity civilly and personally. Now, from what I understand, reading this Colorado law, it doesn't affect 1983 acts through the federal statute that allows you to sue officers in their official capacity, but this is state specific. Now, Lakai, I have to ask, this seems like a step, and I was happy when I read it because qualified immunity has been used as a bar from any type of recourse for these actions, but they capped it at $25,000. They initially said $100,000, but interest groups fought back and got it to $25,000. Does this seem like it has enough teeth? Does it seem like it's strong enough? What do you make of this qualified immunity in this specific carve-out?
Well, Brian, I agree with you. It is a step in the right direction. Have we hit a home run? No, not yet, but we're working towards that spot. We're working towards that space. So we have to continue to work at it. We have to continue to make sure we have diverse candidates when it comes to politics so that we're considering all options. All options are out on the table. I certainly don't think that we've done enough. You talked about the fact that there's $25,000 cap. When you think about a loved one being taken away from you by being shot by the police and it was wrong, it was incorrect conduct, $25,000 certainly is not going to make you feel any better. And I don't think any monetary amount will make you feel any better. But it's certainly a slap in the face to say, hey, we know that the officer was wrong, but we're only going to give you $25,000. But we've got to keep moving that step forward and continue to push so that we can get beyond that $25,000 mark.
Now, you talk about the $25,000 in a very important way, for ability to recoup your losses. I mean, funeral arrangements, like everything that comes with the death of an individual, just from a monetary standpoint. I won't talk about it from just like from a spiritual or emotional standpoint. I don't see $25,000 really helping out, but I think there's another aspect as well, and that being a deterrence for police officers. The question becomes, is $25,000 enough to say, hey, maybe I shouldn't choke out this individual who's handcuffed, or maybe I shouldn't shoot this person while they're running away from me, because that's the argument they make in the criminal justice avenue, that is this enough of a deterrence to stop someone from that action? Do you think that that thought process should be applied to police officers as well? And do you think that this kind of fits, that $25,000 is enough?
Absolutely. I think that should totally be a consideration. I mean, if you peel back the layers of qualified immunity, it was to protect officers because they wanted to feel like they could do their job without being sued civilly. But they are going to have a jury of their peers and any potential victims' peers review the case and determine whether or not they are in fact necessarily need to pay somebody for the crimes that they've committed. So it's not a situation where if you peel back qualified immunity and it no longer protects the officers from being sued civilly, they're going to have to pay out that money automatically. But a jury will have the opportunity to decide that. But you certainly want to put their feet to the fire. Make it more than $25,000. Make the potential millions of dollars, because when they think about that and think about being charged criminally, it may deter them. So I don't think where we are right now is going to deter them. $25,000, I don't think it's enough.
Okay. So we'll see how that goes, because again, Colorado is the first of 50 and one District of Columbia to start. Maybe, do you think that this could catch on fire, that more states would start adopting this? And we understand, Lakai, this is you throwing darts at a dartboard. If you were to bet, what would be the next state or two to maybe follow with Colorado? Again, we're not holding you to this. This is a complete bet.
Yeah, don't hold me to it, Brian. Now, you see that they were able to do this with bipartisan support. This is not a party issue. I don't think it should fall into Democrats versus Republicans, but it should be based on human rights. I think that New York has been a leader as it comes to everything that has occurred, including the pandemic and civil rights. So I think that New York would be the next state to review this and consider it.
Look, I feel like you're looking at my notes and cheating a little. New York is going to be the next story we talk in the next block, and I want you to keep that idea because I'm in New York myself. I hope that you're true and that's true. That's going to happen. But let's talk about New York after the break, where we saw a viral video of a young African American man being choked out after the state passed the ban on chokeholds. We'll be back with that. Welcome back to Justice and Peace. Again, we're talking about reform from the point of view for the protesters, the public defenders, the people who are looking to have the police officers correct, change, or completely just move away from the actions that they're doing. Now, in the beginning, we talked about Breonna Taylor, an officer being fired. We know that there are Breonna Taylor laws that are starting. We also talked about Colorado law for state qualified immunity being disbanded. Now we come to New York, where just a few days ago, or about a week or two ago, a chokehold was disbanded because of protest of George Floyd. But lo and behold, last week we saw another viral video here in New York City in Rockaway Park in Queens, New York, of another individual being choked by an officer. Let's take a look first at the cell phone video of this tragic incident.
All right, I got just stay back. Stop blocking the view. Well, I'm just letting him go. He's just sit. Yo, stop choking him, bro. You guys can record. Yo, stop choking him. Yo, he's choking him. Let him go, bro.
Got him. He's out. He's out. He's out. Look.
Back up.
Officer. Look at this. He's out. Look. Yeah, fuck you. Fuck you, Alfredo. Fuck you. Fucking. Look. Yeah, fuck you. Fuck you, Alfredo. Fuck you. Fucking.
Fuck him! Yo, he's choking him! Let him go! Fuck you! We're not doing nothing wrong. We're listening to music. We're listening to music. They fucking come and choking us. Fucking fuck. Why is he the only one getting arrested? Yeah, right.
All right, before we discuss more, I want you to see a separate angle, and that being the official release of the body-worn camera what the officers had on them. Let's take a quick look at that.
Love to give me a breathalyzer. Stoner, go ahead. I ain't driving shit. You should suck it, nigga. What the fuck are you doing, bro? What are you doing? Get away from me, bro. I didn't even do this. I'm like, come on, bro. I didn't even do this. Yeah, of course you didn't. We're on camera
Number two. Just stay back.
Stop blocking the view. Well, I'm just trying to go. This is shit. Yo, stop choking him, bro.
You guys can record.
Yo, stop choking him. Yo, he's choking him. Let him go, bro.
He's out.
Let him go.
Look.
Back up.
Yo, back the fuck away from him.
Back up.
Come on, chill. You choking him. Yo, stop choking. He's choking him. Yo, he's fucking. Yo, he's choking him. We're not doing nothing wrong with my brother. Let's go. Word? All right. I want to see the
All right, so with all of these videos, you need a little bit of context. This is Ricky Bellevue being released and being arrested, and his defense attorney in Queens has said that as of the filming of this or this show, he is still recovering from his injuries. Now, Ricky Bellevue is bipolar. I believe he's also schizophrenic. I'm not sure if I read that correctly, but he's definitely bipolar by reports. And he was in an outpatient facility that was closed due to coronavirus. And there's an interaction between him and the officers that they let go for a long period of time. But when he continued to argue with him being Ricky arguing with the officers, you see that interaction where the officer tackles him. I don't see any time where he's being violent or he has any weapons or anything of that nature. But let's bring in our expert, Lakai. Lakai, what do you make of this video? What are you seeing as this whole interaction went down?
Brian, so, we hear time and time again that you don't know what happened, but we know what happened. We have it there on camera, and I couldn't agree with you more. We see Mr. Bellevue. He is sitting there peacefully. It does not seem like he is fighting the officer, and suddenly he's attacked and he's put in this chokehold. So we have to question why this is happening, and the officers are well aware of the fact that it is on tape. It's being recorded. Cell phones are out. So you question why this continues to happen over and over and over and over again.
Yeah. So this is, I think, an argument that is really being bolstered in Black Lives Matter and other police reform arguments that we passed the law. So why are their actions changing? No matter what, it kind of feeds that argument. No matter what reform we do, if it's still the same people doing the same thing, then the same things will happen. And so this, I think, is the argument for defunding the police, that we need to start from scratch, start using community policing rather than these officers, because they're still trained and still operating the same ways that even today the laws don't support. And so I think that's an important thing to look at. We also want to talk about the tweets from the New York City mayor and the NYPD commissioner. The mayor said that this is the fastest the NYPD's ever seen discipline for an officer, and that's correct. This is very fast. It's happening quicker than I think anyone can agree with. But I also see problems. Lakai, I'm not sure if you saw, but the thing that bothered me, and here are the tweets you can look at while we're discussing, the officer who's actually doing the chokehold isn't paying attention to Mr. Bellevue being handcuffed. So he doesn't know when the actual quote-unquote ends. He has to be alerted by one of his other officers who taps him on the shoulder. But the officer tapping him on the shoulder doesn't know how hard that stranglehold is. So while you have multiple officers, the ones who are strangling and the ones who are detaining are different officers who are not communicating effectively to each other. So you can have someone die before the handcuffs come on, and I think that involves a lot of the problem. That was chaos there, and chaos leads to death. What else did you see?
So, Brian, I certainly agree with you. And this one, it talks about, and it looks to the leadership to define how the officer should move forward. We have to make sure that they are having proper training, that they have open communication when they're in these situations, and that they're human beings at the very least. I mean, if you hear that he is being choked and people are screaming out to you that he's being choked, then take that into consideration. Check the officer behind you. See if he's been handcuffed yet. But before any of that happens, Eric Garner Anti-Chokehold Act has been passed. You know that choking is not permitted, so it shouldn't happen. And on top of it, it is deemed a Class C felony. So there should be a swift investigation. We understand that he has been fired, he's been terminated, but we need to move forward with making sure that he is also charged. So while they have swift investigations within the department, we need to make sure that any charges that are going to come down and come down quickly without compromising the investigation.
Yeah. And I want to make sure I'm very clear, because I think I misspoke. He's been suspended without pay. He is not fired. And that was my fault. And just a little bit more context. Ricky Bellevue was charged with disorderly conduct, resisting arrest, and obstruction of governmental administration in this, which basically means for most people who do defense work in New York, you weren't listening to the officers when they told you what to do and they fought you. But a little bit more context with this officer, he was actually caught pistol whipping a teen back in 2014. Now, subsequently, there was a bench trial, meaning that there was no jury, just a judge deciding in 2016, and he was found not guilty. I believe that that individual did suffer some injuries from being pistol whipped in the mouth, but this is an Officer Afanador, who has been in the criminal justice system on both sides before. Do you think that that has any effect in terms of how this officer is going to be perceived, that he has a record now for doing this, even though he was found not guilty?
Well, Brian, I think it's obvious that he does aggressive policing. If he is being charged with and has undergone a trial for pistol whipping a teenager, you have to question whether or not he's fit to maintain this position as an officer. So back to what you said, him being terminated, or excuse me, being suspended without pay, you question whether or not the next step needs to happen. He needs to be permanently terminated from this position and cannot hold a position within the police force, not only within the state of New York, but within the country at this point.
Yeah. And there's got to be something on the back end. I mean, this entire show has been talking about the great change. It is great change. As a defense attorney in New York, we're like, wow, look how quickly things are moving. But it still has that back end of, so what are the repercussions? What do you think is going to happen as we go forward and police officers start seeing repercussions? Because people are talking about officers just walking off the job. Do you think there's a balance that can be struck there?
I think it's certainly a hard balance, no question about that. We all know that every time officers go into the line of fire, they're putting their life on the line. So there's no question. There's certainly some empathy when it comes to officers, but we have to make sure that we have the right officers doing the job. And we want to make sure that the leadership is in place and making sure that they're having proper training for each one of these individual officers.
Yeah. And the other, and 100%. Absolutely have to do that. We want quality officers in any way, shape, and form in which they come onto the streets. Look, I want to thank you very much. We have Keeping the Peace coming up next. But I think we want to continue to echo Lakai's words about finding the right officers, because a part of the problem here is that these officers might get fired in one precinct, move to another county or state, and then get rehired. We have to have a whole network of understanding what these officers' reputations are in the previous communities they were in, and making sure we elevate those strong officers who are protecting us and degrade, remove, and not allow other officers to kind of move piecemeal to other neighborhoods to continue actions like this. See you tomorrow.